From 2015 onwards, Europe took in over 4 million people from the Middle East and Africa. As you've probably seen on this channel, the consequences have been nothing short of disastrous, so much so that even Angela Merkel later admitted failure. These decisions will reshape Europe for generations. But standing in defiance of the EU, one country chose a radically different path, a path many thought was impossible in today's political climate. Not only did it shut the gates to mass migration, it took an especially hardline stance against Islamic immigration, something almost no one dares to do anymore. That country, of course, is Hungary. And Hungary's decision didn't come out of nowhere. To understand why this small Central European country reacted so fiercely, you have to go back, way back. In the 16th century, much of Hungary was under Ottoman Turkish rule. For over 150 years, the country was carved up, its Christian kingdoms pushed to the edges, its land occupied by Muslim forces. To this day, that era is remembered not simply as a military defeat, but as a civilizational wound. Hungarians have long seen themselves as the bulwark of Christian Europe. That legacy didn't fade with the Ottomans. It was passed down, reinforced through generations, and even written into the Hungarian constitution. So when images of young Muslim men flooding across Europe's borders appeared on Hungarian screens in 2015, it activated nothing short of a historical memory. The thing is, Hungary never really had a large Muslim population to begin with. In 2011, just 0.06% of its population identified as Muslim. These were just a handful of university students from the Middle East and a few well-integrated families. So when the Europe migrant crisis hit, it was seen as an invasion, a foreign force that had no precedent and no roots in the country. And for Hungary, with its long-standing identity as a Christian nation on the fault line of East and West, this was the moment to draw the line. The pressure on Hungary began building in early 2015. Wars in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan had unleashed a wave of migration into Europe. The Western Balkan route through Greece, Macedonia, and Serbia funneled hundreds of thousands towards Hungary's southern border. By mid-2015, the scale was staggering. Over 390,000 people crossed into Hungary that year alone, most aiming to reach Germany or Scandinavia. Every day, hundreds arrived at Budapest's Keleti station. Others walked across open farmland from Serbia. Police were overwhelmed. Makeshift camps sprang up and tempers flared. At Ruske, a major border crossing, clashes erupted between migrants and officers. The situation spiraled out of control. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán saw a crisis and acted.
Az élethez való jog minden más jogot megelőz. Mint ahogy az önvédelem joga is erősebb minden másnál. Semmiféle ideológia vagy gazdasági érdek miatt nem tehetjük ki életveszélynek az európai polgárokat.
In June, he ordered a 175-kilometer razor wire fence along the Serbian border. By September, it was finished. A new law made illegal crossings punishable by up to 3 years in prison. Orbán also declared a state of migration emergency, handing sweeping powers to police and the military. Transit zones were set up at Ruske and Tompa, where only a handful of asylum applications were processed daily. Everyone else was stuck on the Serbian side. By October, the flow rerouted through Croatia, so Hungary built a fence there too. When the EU Council approved a mandatory refugee quota plan in response to the crisis, which involved redistributing 120,000 asylum seekers, Hungary flat out refused to take its assigned 1,294 people. Instead, Orbán took the EU to court, arguing the plan violated national sovereignty.
You know, the problem is not a European problem. The problem is a German problem. Nobody would like to stay in Hungary.
In 2016, Viktor Orbán decided to double down. On October 2nd, the Hungarian government asked its citizens a blunt question in a national referendum. Do you want the EU to be able to mandate the resettlement of non-Hungarian citizens into Hungary without Parliament's consent? The campaign that followed flooded the streets with billboards paid for by taxpayers. When the results came in, 98% of voters rejected the EU's refugee quotas, but voter turnout was just under 44%, making the referendum legally invalid. Orbán declared it an outstanding victory nonetheless, claiming it provided him the mandate to solidify Hungary's borders against Brussels. Security measures intensified further. Police gained authority to conduct summary pushbacks of migrants caught within 8 kilometers of the border, sending them directly back through small openings in the fence without allowing asylum claims. In 2017, Hungary escalated again. Parliament mandated detention for all asylum seekers in transit zones surrounded by razor wire and armed guards. The UN's refugee agency labelled these facilities as effectively detention centres, where families were confined indefinitely in shipping containers. By 2018, Orbán cemented these policies into law. Parliament passed a controversial Stop Soros package, criminalising NGOs and lawyers who helped migrants, while a constitutional amendment explicitly prohibited foreign populations from settling in Hungary, declaring the nation's Christian heritage non-negotiable.
There is only one important element of Hungarian public life that is not transparent, and that is the Soros-led mafia-like network and their so-called NGO agent-like organizations.
But while Hungary was cracking down on Soros-funded NGOs, Western governments were quietly embracing his agenda, just in a different form. They didn't secure borders, they built surveillance states. In the UK, the Online Safety Act censors the web in real time. In Australia, encrypted apps are forced to hand over your private data. And in the US and EU, leaders are openly demanding backdoors into your devices. That's exactly why I use Proton VPN and why I think you should too. They're based in Switzerland, outside the reach of US, EU, UK and Australian law. They don't keep logs and are built by the same team behind Proton Mail. When the UK passed its surveillance laws, Proton VPN became the #1 app on the App Store. Their stealth protocol beats censorship firewalls. Secure Core routes your traffic through privacy-first countries, and NetShield blocks trackers before they ever reach you. I've used Proton Mail since Australia announced sweeping surveillance laws last year, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it's now essential. If you want to protect your privacy and support this channel, hit the link below to get up to 60% off Proton VPN. Now, by 2019, Hungary had largely achieved its goal of discouraging Muslim asylum seekers. Applications plummeted from nearly 177,000 in 2015 to just 500 in 2019, and only 30 of these were approved. The country's Muslim population remained at just 0.1 to 0.2%, among Europe's lowest. But Hungary's harsh policies soon drew intense international scrutiny. In March 2019, the European Parliament triggered Article 7 sanctions procedures against Hungary, accusing Orbán's government of breaching fundamental EU values through its treatment of migrants. Human rights lawyers challenged Hungary in court, most notably in the case of Ilyas and Ahmed versus Hungary. 2 Bangladeshi asylum seekers argued they had been unlawfully held for 23 days in Hungary's transit zone and then expelled to Serbia without proper hearings. In November 2019, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Hungary's actions had exposed the migrants to harm, violating their basic rights, although the court stopped short of condemning the transit zone confinement itself. Pressure mounted further when, in May 2020, the EU's highest court delivered a decisive ruling against Hungary. It declared that holding asylum seekers in transit zones for over 28 days amounted to unlawful detention, and Hungary's practice of rejecting claims based on passage through Serbia violated EU rules. Orbán briefly appeared to relent, shutting down the controversial transit zones. But instead of truly opening up asylum, Hungary enacted a new scheme requiring asylum seekers to first register their intent at Hungarian embassies abroad, deliberately circumventing EU asylum laws. Brussels immediately challenged this move. The standoff continued. In November 2021, the EU Court of Justice found Hungary's Stop Soros law criminalising aid to migrants violated fundamental rights. Orbán dismissed this ruling, leaving the law in place. Hungary's own constitutional court soon backed him, asserting Hungary's sovereignty over migration matters. In 2022, something rather interesting happened. Orbán warmly welcomed tens of thousands of Ukrainian refugees, emphasizing their shared Christian background, while continuing to shut the door firmly against Muslim asylum seekers from the Middle East and Africa. Hungary's messaging was very clear. By 2023, Hungary had effectively achieved zero migration from Muslim-majority countries, receiving just 46 asylum applications in all of 2022 and only 28 in the first half of 2023. Meanwhile, the EU imposed fines totaling around 200 million euros on Hungary for refusing to comply with court judgments. But Orbán remained defiant, accusing Brussels of punishing Hungary for defending Europe's borders, even as other EU states began tightening their own. The fortress Hungary had built remained as strong as ever, with no signs of relenting. But the diplomatic costs go beyond money. Orbán's standoff with Brussels has become one of the EU's longest-running battles. While the Commission keeps issuing legal rebukes and penalties, Hungary frames them as attacks on national sovereignty, fuel for domestic politics. In press conferences, Orbán mocks the West for only now waking up to the migration problem, and to many Hungarians, he's not wrong. The political winds have now shifted. Poland built a wall on its border with Belarus. Austria imposed annual caps on asylum approvals. Denmark, run by a left-wing government, now openly aims for zero refugees and wants to process claims outside Europe. None of these countries have gone as far as Hungary's embassy-only policy, but the rhetoric once considered far-right has crept into the mainstream. A decade ago, Hungary was treated as the outlier. Now, it's starting to look like the preview. And so, two Europes have emerged. One is strained by assimilation challenges with a growing Islamic voting bloc, while slowly revisiting the decisions of 2015. The other is Hungary, demographically stable, politically combative, and more determined than ever to guard its cultural borders. So what happens now? Orbán is betting that control, heritage, and borders will matter more than legal pressure or job stats. Brussels is betting that isolation will eventually come at too high a price, and ultimately, neither side is blinking. Hey, you made it to the end. As always, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and give the video a thumbs up. It really helps. A massive thank you to all my channel members and Patreon supporters. You're the reason I can keep making content like this. If you want to support the channel, consider joining the crew. Just hit the join button below or head over to Patreon. Even a small pledge goes a long way, and I would genuinely love to have you on board. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.